President Trump's immigration crackdown today prompts a warning for Colorado's population of people here illegally.
They should get their documents and affairs in order.
And we've learned how long Denver waited to tell immigration agents about the release of a man later arrested for murder. My awkward moment with Colorado's treasurer and a pesky quote.
Whether it's the position of the treasurer's office that these para board members you disagree with should go themselves.
The ad promises Congressman Mike Coffman has a plan to replace Obamacare. So can we see it? You can see why being a weed sommelier is now a thing. And you see what's happening at this brewery? You will, next. A warning has gone out to people in Colorado who are in this country illegally. Get your papers in order. That warning comes not from opponents of illegal immigration or from law enforcement. It comes from an immigration attorney who's friendly to people who are here illegally. President Trump's new deportation rules expand fast-track deportations from just border zones to the entire country, and from people here illegally for up to 2 weeks to people who have been here for up to 2 years.
So if you've been in the country, for example, for more than 2 years, then one piece of advice that we may offer our clients is to, get your documents and paperwork in order so that if you are encountered by an immigration enforcement officer, then at least you have your documents ready to show them that you're not subjected to the expedited removal procedure, and in fact you're eligible to go in front of an immigration judge to determine what kind of relief, if any, you might have.
David Kulko's been practicing immigration law for 17 years, and he says, for all the talk of these so-called sanctuary cities, Denver and Aurora have been tagged with that label, he doesn't think they offer any real protection for people here illegally.
I don't think people are safer. There's really no restriction on the ability of the federal government to go into any sanctuary city. The point is that sanctuary cities are making policies on a local level in order to help protect or support their local populations. At the same time, I don't think being a sanctuary city actually restricts the federal government from performing its enforcement role.
President Trump's order today also revives a program to enlist local and state law enforcement officers to work more closely with ICE agents. The El Paso County Sheriff's Office was the last agency in Colorado to participate in that, and they pulled out 2 years ago and didn't get back to me today on whether El Paso County would like to renew that partnership with ICE.
10 hours and 7 minutes. Remember that as you consider this next story. Today we learned that's how much time Immigrations and Customs Enforcement officials might have had to work out a plan with the Denver jail to pick up a 19-year-old suspected of living in the country illegally. That pickup never happened. And a few months later, Denver police say that teen took part in a murder at a Denver light rail station. The day was December 20th. Inside the Denver jail, a suspected car thief finally had the money to bond out. The man's name, Ever Valles, a 19-year-old flagged for possible deportation by Immigration and Customs Enforcement because ICE called him a Mexican national, a gang member, and a prior criminal. 9 Wants to Know now knows the time the court approved Valles' bond, 1:26 p.m. Here's why that time is important. Because another 10 hours and 7 minutes would pass before the Denver Sheriff's Department would notify ICE of his pending release. And that's important because 26 minutes after they sent this fax, or 1 minute before midnight, Valles walked out of the jail. ICE never did pick him up. And then a month and a half later, Valles and another man, according to Denver police, tried to rob Tim Cruz at a light rail station in West Denver. Cruz was subsequently shot and killed. If convicted, Valles faces life in prison. The Denver Sheriff's Department tells us if ICE wanted Valles so badly, they could have asked for a warrant to try to hold him. They could have tried to pick him up after he was released as well. They could have done a lot of things. Valles, for his part, was in court today on first advisement with his co-defendant, Nathan Valdez. They will have time to sort of go through that court proceedings. It's going to take some time, though.
So when it came down to that last day, people are going to want to know, is that how the system is actually supposed to work?
And that is the question that we are asking right now, not just of Denver, but of multiple law enforcement officials and former ICE officials as well, because that really is, if that's the best the system can do, maybe the system needs to be tweaked.
A fact check. All right, Chris Vanderveen, thank you. A state treasurer doesn't often make headlines. When he has, it's because Walker Stapleton, a Republican, has been criticizing what he calls mismanagement of PARA, the state employee pension fund. He's widely expected to run for governor, and Stapleton faced a key test of leadership when he sacked his deputy treasurer after a series of profane outbursts against their opponents on the pension board, including recently saying that board members should go F themselves.
I'm curious whether it's the position of the Treasurer's office that these para board members you disagree with should go themselves.
No, I certainly understand the frustration, and but this office doesn't condone the colorful language. I think decorum is important, and as a result, we asked for the Deputy Treasurer's resignation, and he submitted it. But I think that this is a very frustrating situation. Para has the largest unfunded liability in the state. That unfunded liability has grown by more than $1 billion on average every year I've been in office. And so I think that it came from a place of deep-seated frustration.
So you see that you don't condone colorful language, but when we asked you about this, your statement condoned colorful language. You said that if para doesn't fix the debt problem, that they're going to get a lot of colorful language.
They will.
I mean, is it fair for you to say, I don't condone this kind of language, but wink, wink, nod, nod, you're going to hear a lot more of it if you don't fix the problem?
No, because if I did condone the language, he would still be working here, and you would pass right by his desk on the way to mine. So he paid the ultimate price, which is the price of losing his job, and I think that was the appropriate thing to do.
I was on Facebook the other day, and I saw your face on an ad for term limits.
Yes.
What's that about?
It's an issue I deeply believe in. It's an issue that should get more coverage. It's one of the few issues that I think there's been bipartisan agreement on, both between President Trump and President Obama. I was contacted by one of the guys at U.S. Term Limits who I know, and I agreed to do the ad for them. I think we shouldn't have career politicians. I think you become more susceptible to being concerned about your next election, more susceptible to special interests and lobbyists, and this shouldn't be a career for anybody.
If we were to look back, would we find that you have publicly and strongly taken positions on term limits now before you're positioning for a run for governor? Would we find that? No.
Well, you know what? Term limits in the last 12 months haven't been at the forefront of anybody's discussion. So if I was being honest with you, is term limits something I've ruminated on and wrote a dissertation for graduate school on, 20 years ago? No. Is it something that I recognize as an important topical issue and was overjoyed to be a leader of in Colorado? Absolutely.
Stapleton says, who knows if he's going to run for governor? He's going to keep his head down and keep working, which, of course, is exactly what you're supposed to say if you're going to run for governor. You can see our whole discussion right now on the next YouTube channel. Hey, no major wildfires to report on another warm, dry, windy day, but that wind did bring down an 80-foot cottonwood tree onto a home in Loveland this morning. 3 people were inside at the time. No one was hurt. If you're using your home in Denver as a short-term rental and you're not giving the city a cut of the action, you are now risking some very real trouble. As of today, the city is issuing violations for people renting out their places without that $25 license from the city. If you get caught, it could cost you $999 per violation. Now, there's all kinds of boring rules and regulations. If you rent short-term, you need to read them. They're in this story on 9news.com. May I make a recommendation? A recommendation that you go make a recommendation on how RTD can improve an iconic bus line in our city, the one on East Colfax. The 15L is a true taste of the facts, if you know what I'm saying. And RTD wants community input on how to improve the line, as well as the actual physical bus stops that are on Colfax. We have a link to RTD's survey in the next section on 9news.com. The nonstop ads promise Congressman Mike Coffman has a plan to replace Obamacare. Our truth test wonders if it's, true. And come with us on an exciting journey into the world of weed sommeliers.
Cannabis is so different from grapes, and cannabis products are so unbelievably diverse.
Diverse is a good word for our forecast, because some of it is nice and some of it is total. Republicans swept into power promising to repeal and replace Obamacare. So about that, there's still no cohesive plan to replace the ACA, no matter what the happy TV ads say. Politics guy Brandon Rittiman drops a little truth on him.
This ad comes from a group called the American Action Network, which does not disclose its donors and supports Republicans in Congress. It's technically an issue ad suggesting that you call Congressman Coffman to give him an attaboy for working on health care.
Our health care system isn't working. Mike Coffman has a plan to fix it.
This is an overstatement. Mike Coffman doesn't have a plan to replace Obamacare, but his staff points out he does have some specific principles that he expects to see included in the plan to replace the Affordable Care Act, which is not the kind of thing you would write if the plan was actually done. In fairness to Coffman, this isn't an ad he made, but he is meant to benefit from it. And if the ad is a bit over the top in singing Coffman's praises about changing health care laws, well, at least he's in good company.
Carlos Curbelo has a plan to fix it. Jeff Denham has a plan. Steve Scalise, David Valadeo, Republicans have a plan to fix it.
So the key message here is whatever Republicans come up with, the American Action Network group thinks it's going to be great. And they think Democrats are bad because the group is also running a version of this same ad with scary music against Democrats around the country. But we'll stick with the happy music version that Mike Coffman gets here in Colorado, which makes the exact same arguments about Obamacare.
Rising premiums and deductibles. Washington intruding between doctors and patients. Expensive mandates that destroy jobs.
Let's take these one at a time. It's true premiums and deductibles have increased since Obamacare, but it also needs a little context, which is that premiums and deductibles were also increasing before Obamacare. The bit about Washington intruding between you and your doctor is honestly too vague for us to truth test. One might argue that's been the case for more than a century, since the very first time that Congress passed any laws on health care. The part about mandates destroying jobs is fair. The New York Fed surveyed companies and found roughly 1 in 5 cutting jobs in service and manufacturing. There's also evidence a relatively small number of workers were dialed back to part-time because of the ACA. Despite all that, it's worth pointing out that the national jobs reports have been steadily improving with the broader economic recovery. The ad goes on to make several promises about what's going to be in the new plan, which does overlap with what Congressman Coffman's office told us he wants to see. We've seen some GOP proposals to replace Obamacare, but since they haven't settled on one, we really can't fact-check those promises yet. And that gets us to our bottom line. This ad is glossing over the fact that Republicans have yet to unite behind a plan on health care in an effort to make you think it's going to be awesome, whatever plan they end up with. With your truth test, I'm Brandon Ritterman.
And as always, Brandon invites you to check his work. He puts his research for these truth tests on 9news.com.
The truth is, the winds are howling along the Front Range foothills tonight. I'm meteorologist Kathy Sabin. The winds ushering a change in our weather. Today, however, record high temperatures, almost 30 degrees above average. Compliments of those gusty winds out of the southwest, which will be shifting tomorrow. Typical high this time of year is 47, and we won't see that number until the weekend. As a matter of fact, the winds could blow over 50 and 60 miles per hour above 8,000 feet again tonight. Tinder dry along the Front Range and eastern plains. Extreme fire danger conditions, and not a lot of moisture coming in the next 24 hours. But the northern mountains will start to see a little bit of snow fly early in the afternoon tomorrow, and a winter weather watch will go out for the northern mountains Wednesday into Thursday. Lower elevations, a little wind tomorrow, a few more clouds in the picture, and about a 10-degree cool down. 40, a mild night in the city, partly cloudy skies. Tomorrow, we'll have plenty of sunshine around here. Temperatures still way above average, but a whole lot cooler than today. And speaking of cool, temperatures trending down into the 30s as we move into Friday and Saturday, with about 1 to 3 inches of snow possible by Friday morning. Melting snow on the pavement, of course, but any moisture at this point will be beneficial ahead of what looks to be a beautiful weekend. Temperatures ranging between 38 and 50 degrees.
Kathy, thanks. So try as we might, we just can't convince dogs of the danger of thin ice, even in the mountains. The Eagle River Fire Protection District had 2 separate calls yesterday for dogs through the ice. 3 dogs total, all of them made it out okay, and all of them would not have ended up in the icy water if their humans had had the good sense to keep them on a leash. This is also where we remind you, if your dog goes in the drink, call 911. Rescuers will come for your dog because they know if they didn't do that, they'd have to come for you. It's time for a beer. Let us pray.
Whoever shall drink it may gain health and body and peace in their soul and mind.
The connection between that blessed brew and my wholly inadequate attempt at brewing for you. And we were so focused on finally pronouncing the place correctly, I got something wrong last night. My confession, next. Next is introduce you to a certified cheese expert. You know about wine sommeliers. How about cannabis sommeliers? The Trichome Institute, a school that teaches people about pot, has a class on the finer points of marijuana. The Institute's president says this isn't about learning about how to pair pot with your dinner. The class is teaching people how different strains of cannabis affect people. And you don't just show up and get baked. It's all based on smell and visual characteristics of the various buds. And unlike wine sommeliers, it's not just about the taste. The class is hoping to help people learn the difference between sedative strains and stimulating strains of marijuana.
You have to understand that this industry just came out of the black market. And so all of these strains that people go shopping for are completely inaccurate and inconsistent. So when you buy a Merlot, you get a Merlot. But when you shop and try to buy Blue Dream, you have a 9 out of 10 chance that you're not going to actually purchase Blue Dream. And so that's what we call the strain name dilemma. And so, that's problematic.
These classes are held about once a month, and they claim to attract people from across the country and across the social spectrum, from lawyers to scientists to soccer moms. The most Colorado thing we saw today was a blessed...
Bless, oh Lord, this beer from the fruits of the earth which you have created.
Beer with a built-in blessing. How about that? Brewed today at Joyride Brewing in Edgewater. Father West from St. Dominic Parish said a few words over the beer they're calling West Side Blessed Side. It's a collaboration between Joyride and fellow West Side brewery Little Machine. They're putting it together for an annual event called Collaboration Fest, which features beers, quite often one-and-done creations that are made collaboratively by at least 2 breweries. They do make an exception for the media collaboration. This year, a bunch of us who write about beer in Denver and wish that we could brew like the pros got to brew with the pros at Great Divide Brewing. And I think you'll like what we came up with, what they came up with, actually. We mainly just supervise and do a little bit of the grunt work. It's a hazy IPA, very tasty, should be quite citrusy. Collaboration Fest is March 25th at the National Western Complex. A note about last night's story on the pronunciation of Huérfano County in southern Colorado. The local that we had on pronounced it correctly, but she offered an incorrect explanation for the word's origin. Huérfano means orphan in Spanish. Huérfano Butte stands all alone out near Walsenburg, hence the name for the butte, the river nearby in the county. Not trying to cover our butte, but we sincerely apologize for the error. Your feedback, and you know we read it all, next. We finish with your feedback, as always, and it comes from the left and right, as always. Tom McGrath thinks we're propagating a deportation scare, talking about these orders from President Trump and ignoring record deportations under President Obama. Tom, we'll give people the facts. They can decide for themselves whether or not they're scared, and we just did a story the other night on those record deportations. Carol England doesn't like that we call it Obamacare, says that is pejorative. President Obama said call it Obamacare on February 17th, 2014, August 15th, 2011, and August 20th, 2016. And Mark writes in, I liked Kyle Clark before it was cool to like Kyle Clark. I assure you, Mark, it is still not cool to like me. I will see you next time.